How many of you run your own companies? How many are India focused? And how many sell outside India as well? How many of you want to sell outside India as well? Okay, cool. So I think I have a decent audience. Um, yeah. Oh, okay. For a quick introduction, I run a company called Capillary. We are in the retail customer engagement space, a SaaS solution. About 6 years old. We're about 250 strong as a team. Yeah, about 9 offices around the world. The India business, we started off with India. The first 2.5, 3 years of the company were just India. We just grew the India business out. And then we realized that, we could probably do well in markets outside India as well. That's when we said, let's start doing something on the international side. And that's when we really started the international business. Just to set the things right on the stuff that I'm going to speak about. So we sell to enterprises. Our average ticket size is about $80K a year. It's typically a 3 to 5 year kind of a buy. But the ticket size varies from $40K to about $1 million a year. So I'm going to talk about hardcore enterprise sales. We don't sell online. So anything that I'm talking about is not relevant to online sales or any of that. Yeah, we have offices and customers in US, UK, Dubai, South Africa, India, Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, China, Australia, and we keep adding 1 or 2 every quarter. Right. So that's 200 customers across 15 countries. So I'll just cover some of these points as we, why go international? How do you get your first customer? Delivery, product delivery becomes very important in international markets. Then scaling sales up, and lastly, the most important thing, culture and team dynamics. How do you keep that right? Why international? For us, it was very simple actually. We could, the India market for us was about 100 crores. And we were already doing a good percentage of that, and we felt, we wanted to build a much bigger company. So for us, the reason to actually get out was, okay, I did that again. So the reason for us to really get out and build an international business was really the market size. This is bad. Yeah. I didn't touch anything. So actually, can you just do the next when I ask you to? Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, the next slide actually. Back. Yeah. I think it's something to do with the shake. Never mind. You can go back. Go back. Yeah. The second reason I think you might want to go international is it's better margins. Lesser support is required. There's this old adage that if you're building a business for India, you're essentially selling a mobile number. The guy is going to call you for any small thing that he's going to have an issue with. The pros are obviously that you have much larger ticket sizes. Our average ticket size in India is about $20,000 a year. Outside is about 4 times that. The other big advantage is eggs in many baskets, right? So if one market is not doing well, another market does well, and that works very well for us. So I've rarely had quarters when I've done badly compared to the last quarter because some geo picks up and does well, even if some other geo doesn't. The cons, your cost of sale is going to be extremely high. I don't think you can really bootstrap very well, especially an enterprise sales company, if you want to build an international business. You want to make a lot of mistakes, you're going to fail a lot, your cost of sale is going to be extremely high. The other piece is sales cycles are much longer internationally, so you should budget for much longer sales cycles. Our sales cycles in India is about 3 months. Our international sales cycles are anything between 6 to 7 months. Yeah. The other piece is if you have a very spread out operation like we have, then your costs are going to be high, but you have other advantages. Your opportunity to grow is much higher, the market size is much bigger, and all that. Next. Yeah. Now coming to the first customer, right? So the first customer in any business is a very critical one. And when you go international, and we've opened like 10 markets now, and we've tried different models in different markets. We've gone the way of saying, let's hire very senior sales guys and see how well they can open markets for us. We've tried to sell ourselves as founders. My founder Krishna moved to the US. I moved to the UK when we started up. So we've done some of that, and what we realize is the best way to actually, you know, best way to open a market is really one of the founders going selling. And even in terms of the customers that you want to speak to, see if any of your existing customers can take you out. You know, in our case, we work with a lot of retail brands like a Pizza Hut, a Puma, Benetton, people like that. So we just ask these guys to introduce us to any market outside, you know, any of their franchisees in international markets, things like that. And that's the best way to really open a market. The second best is partners. You know, try and, using a small inside sales team, try and reach out to partners who, you know, and initially much smaller partners, right? Like 5 people shops, 10 people shops. The very large guys are not going to be interested in a startup out of India. Right? Very rarely, you know, unless you have like a really big scale, you know, or get lucky. So, so I'd say the best 2 ways to open a new market is either go through existing customers, you know, or either go through partners, you know, who already have existing relationships. And the key there is, you know, referenceability. That's no one's going to buy something new until they believe you and until they see some value, right? So, and hence I'd suggest go with one of these 2. The other piece is, you know, so we've opened markets where we've hired 4 sales guys, you know, spent $1 million in that year and got 0 sales. And we've also opened markets where, you know, we've gone in the other way of saying we won't actually hire a sales guy. We just went in ourselves. You know, we'd have a small inside sales team which would call, set up 10 meetings for me for the week, and then I'd fly in and close one of them and come back. You know, so pros and cons, you know, I'd say when you're opening a new market, go in with an account manager as your first guy there. Don't go in with sales guys. I'd suggest that, you know, one of your early sales guys or you going in to sell yourselves is definitely better. And like in other founders that we speak to, I think that's generally the better approach to really take. Yeah. Finally, product market fit, right? So it's not necessary that the product you have has a great fit across all markets. You know, and typically what happens with, you know, sales guys is they will never give you that hard feedback back very clearly. You know, because a lot of times people feel that founders are very passionate about their product and they won't take that feedback very well. And hence it becomes extremely important that the first few pitches in any new market, you're there doing it yourselves. You know, to basically understand whether the guy is going to buy it, why is he not buying it, is it a price issue, was the need that existed in India or whichever market you were doing well at, does it exist here as well? You know, and finally, the biggest issue for us when we flipped from, you know, India to international was India is a very ROI-driven sale. You tell the guy you're going to get 5 times the money, and the guy is mostly going to buy what you want to sell him, right? So, and as Indians, we generally tend to take more risks. You know, it's very owner-driven culture. So, you know, the guy will just say, okay, let's try for 3 months and then decide. International is not like that. It's a very, very, you know, need-based buy. You know, and given that in Capillary, it was always, you know, the founders selling initially, we would do a very push relationship ROI-based sell. And it took us about a year to figure out that that doesn't work in international markets. So there's a good book, it's called Spin Selling. You should read it if you get time. Most international markets work on a very need-based buy. It's very budget-driven. It's very run that way, and which is very, very different from India. So if you think your India sales model or the way you sell in India is going to work outside, mostly not. Next. Yeah, next is, you know, so more than sales, right? I think delivery is going to be extremely key. The big difference for us, we did extremely well in India. We used to, like, I think in our second year, we grew about 8 times. In our third year, we grew about 4.5 times. And, you know, we just knew how to, like, crack this market up. And in the international markets, we start getting clients. We got our first client in the Middle East. We got our 2 clients in UK. We got 2 clients in Singapore. And in 1 year, we actually lost 3 of them. You know, and when we look back, you know, as being a very high culture Indian startup, we would run on Jugaad, you know, so, and that just doesn't work outside. So one thing that you have to be really, really careful about if you really want to do a good global business is Jugaad doesn't work. So please get your delivery right. You will need to invest much more advanced in delivery. You need to hire earlier. It can't be that, you know, the same guy who's selling also does the servicing, also does the support. That doesn't leave a good taste with any of most international customers. The second piece is international customers are not forgiving. In India, you can get away with, a discount or go tell the guy, spend some time with him as a founder, you get away with a lot of stuff. Internationally, that doesn't work. So the most, I'd actually emphasize more on getting your delivery right before you go sell in international markets. The other piece, in India, you get 20 chances of getting something right, and we've always been like that, right? But in international markets, you get one chance. No one cares about how much time you take, and our USP in India was that we could deliver in 2 months, with a lot of issues and errors and all that stuff. When we flipped to international, we kind of realized it very late that it's okay to tell we'll take 6 months and get it right the first time, and the other piece is it's best to separate the relationship management and the technical delivery for international markets. We realized that very late because in our case, in India, our sales account managers would also do a lot of the delivery, set it up, and then move on to the next deal. That doesn't work very well in international markets. Now, finally, what ends up happening if you don't do it very well is you have poor delivery, which leads to client loss, which leads to employee morale issues, and then you have employee churn, and you keep doing that cycle till you say, okay, I'll start clean now. So it's very important that you invest well in delivery if you really want to build a global business as such. So, next. Yeah, scaling up sales, hiring sales guys. I don't have the perfect answer for it. I've just put some stuff here based on experiences that we've had. The average sales guy internationally would cost you about 200 to 250K, fully loaded, even if he doesn't sell even $1, even if he's not able to sell $1 for you. And that's very high, right? That's about $1.5 crore roughly in cost per guy. If they're doing well, then they'll cost you even higher, like 300, 350K, but it's worth it if they're doing, on an average about 1 in 3 sales guys click. And so essentially, and the best way to hire is actually reference-based hiring. Hire through references, hire people who are very hungry. Don't go the headhunter way. We've hired 40 sales guys till now, about 15 from headhunters, the rest direct, through references and things like that. And I can tell you none of my headhunter sales guys have really worked well for us. It's just because the sales guys sell themselves very well. Whether they sell your product or not is a whole different issue. And then the headhunter does a very good job of selling the sales guy to you. So as a net rate result, the chances that you're going to find a very good sales guy is actually quite poor. So I'd any day gone for the other mistake that we've done is we've said let's go hire senior guys who have connections, blah blah blah, and and then you suddenly realize that the guys who have a lot of senior connections will not want to pick the phone, do a lot of cold calls themselves, knock on a lot of doors, can't take rejection very well, all those issues. I think the right blend of sales guys is the 5-6 years experienced guys who know how to sell and who also have that big fire in the belly, and preferably startup experience guys, because a lot of times if you go hire from an Oracle or a Salesforce or a SAP, these guys, the way it works is someone logs into the website, gives them saying, I want to buy, these guys just go take the order and come home. So all that they need to do is talk about golf, get some wine in there. They don't need to sell your value, and when you're a startup, you have to sell value, right? You have to talk about why is your product better. You have to talk about, especially in cases like ours where we have a lot of competition, we need to do that well. So, and that's when I think someone who has some past startup experience is a definite plus. Hire people who can take rejection very well because they will face a lot of rejection. 5-6 years of experience, good fire in the belly. And the most key thing in hiring sales guys is spend a lot of time onboarding. At least do like 10 meetings, 20 meetings with each sales guy yourselves. That becomes extremely key. The first 1-2 years when we did international, we had very few sales guys. There were about 3 or 4. So we would actually do all that ourselves. Now, as we scaled up to a much larger sales organization, our focus on actually onboarding went down a fair bit. And I can tell you productivity dropped straight. So, the other big hat tip, now we're facing that now, so which is good sales guys rarely make good managers. Good sales guys don't make good managers. So we did this mistake of promoting one of our best sales guys in one of our markets as the sales manager, and it was a total disaster. We had to fire the guy, and we also lost all the sales guys we had. So I think these two are very different, are two very different skill sets. So be careful about that. Yeah, and as you hire more international sales guys, you realize that these guys love Salesforce.com and keep updating it and playing golf and having fun. I think it becomes very important that you push them to keep closing. Keep closing. That becomes extremely important. The other piece is after the number of sales guys that we've seen, we've realized that if someone has to click, they'll click in 6 to 9 months. It's a brutal world. So fire anyone who doesn't click in 6 to 9 months. We've tried giving people 18 months, 20 months. People have clicked in 6, continue doing well. If they're not, they generally don't. So yeah, the other big thing is we actually spread out to so many markets that we'd have one sales guy in each market. I definitely say, given that it's a very probability-driven thing, and 1 in 3 sales guys are going to click, probably the right thing to do is actually hire more sales guys in the same market than actually hire one sales guy in multiple markets. Right? Next. Am I out of time? Okay, sorry. The last piece is it becomes very important for you to retain the culture. We've tried models where the first guy who's the first employee there is someone from India, one of our early employees. We've also tried models where we've actually hired someone locally, or someone new to set a geo up. I definitely think the model that works is sending someone from here. A lot of FaceTime helps, so do all your meetings on a Hangout or on video conferencing. Calls are good, but definitely FaceTime is the right way to do things. And don't tolerate any, it happened very, we would actually tolerate a lot of friction between the remote geographies and the Bangalore teams. In hindsight, we should have nipped it in the bud. Because what happens is that friction only grows. You think that, okay, it's cultural differences, chalta hai, doesn't work. Because all those didn't become a part of the culture, and you end up screwing, that specific geo up a fair bit. So the suggestion there is send one of your initial early employees who understands the culture very well to go in there. Let all the interfacing to the Bangalore office actually happen with, through someone who's from India based in that office, because culturally we're very different. I find it very hard even today to get our India employees on call 5 minutes before the call. It's very difficult. It just doesn't happen. So, and it's easier to actually have one guy to change than get your whole Bangalore team or the India team to change for you, right? So, yeah, the last tip, be careful about litigation from employees in international markets. We had it a couple of times. It's very painful, a lot of mental bandwidth drain. So, yeah, but having said that, there's a lot of success that you can, I think I've painted the more hard side of the international expansion piece. The positive sides are there's more money that you can raise. It's more profitable. You have much lesser of the pain that Indian customers give you. Indian customers give you a lot of pain. So that's much lesser outside. And it's definitely a lot of fun winning against an SAP or an Oracle or any of these large guys in their own markets. The kind of kick you get from that is amazing. So thanks then. Thanks guys.